Hi, I'm Diane Macedo. This is a special coverage of day 2 of the historic confirmation hearings for Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson, the first black woman to ever be nominated to the Supreme Court. Today, Judge Jackson's answering questions from members of the Senate Judiciary Committee. They have paused for a brief break, and they will resume shortly. So far, Judge Jackson has been asked about her judicial philosophy, her sentencing record, and her representation of Guantanamo Bay detainees, among other issues. Congressional correspondent Rachel Scott has been following it all from inside the hearing room. And Rachel, Senator Durbin opened up today by playfully calling this part of the confirmation process a trial by ordeal because it's intense. So what's the mood like in the room?
Yeah, and Senator Dick Durbin also said this is now the hard part. Look, heading into this today, Democrats were not expecting this to necessarily be pleasant. They were expecting this to be tense, and at times it has certainly been very contentious. This has been Judge Jackson's opportunity to respond to some of the criticism that she has been getting from Republican senators during this time ahead of her confirmation vote. Now, of course, this is playing out over several hours. Yesterday, we saw opening statements from the 22 members of the Senate Judiciary Committee. Today, we will see these questions unfold over the course of 11 hours. That is the amount of time that she will be in the hot seat. Senators have about 30 minutes each to question Judge Jackson. And notably here, you see the senators shuffling through papers. They have their notes in front of them, but Judge Jackson walked into that room. She sat down, and only next to her, a blank notepad, Diane.
Now, earlier, Rachel, Ranking Committee member Republican Senator Chuck Grassley asked Judge Jackson about her views on so-called court packing, this idea of adding more seats to the Supreme Court to impact the balance between justices viewed as liberal and those viewed as being conservative. Let's listen to that moment.
Court packing is creating new seats for political purposes for a president to appoint more judges. Do you agree with Justice Breyer and Justice Ginsburg that court packing is a bad idea? Before you respond, I'd like to say that you say this question should be left to Congress as a policy issue. I'd reiterate that sitting Supreme Court justices have spoken on that matter, so I don't think it'd be inappropriate for you to do if other people sitting there have said that it's a bad idea.
Well, respectfully, Senator, other nominees to the Supreme Court have responded as I will, which is that it is a policy question for Congress. And I am particularly mindful of not speaking to policy issues because I am so committed to staying in my lane of the system, because I'm just not willing to speak to issues that are properly in the province of this body.
And Rachel, this issue of court packing has come up a few times. What was the response to Judge Jackson's answer there?
Yeah, and this is something that is certainly a big issue here on Capitol Hill. Progressive Democrats have really pushed this idea of court packing, expanding the number of Supreme Court justices on the bench. You heard from Judge Jackson there saying that she's not going to weigh into political issues, and she said as much at the start of this confirmation hearing today that she's going to stay in her lane. But really notable there is the strategy from Democrats. Senator Dick Durbin used almost every single minute of the 30 minutes that he had allotted today trying to get ahead of some of these Republican attacks, trying to get her on the record before Republicans had the chance to question them themselves.
Now, earlier, the committee chairman, Democrat Dick Durbin, asked Judge Jackson about questions that Republicans raised yesterday about her sentencings in past child pornography cases. Let's listen there.
I thought about his charges as I watched you and your family listening carefully yesterday, and what impact it might have had on you personally to know that your daughters, husband, parents, family, and friends were hearing the charges that your implementation of this law, sentencing, endangered children. Could you tell us what was going through your mind at that point?
As a mother and a judge who has had to deal with these cases, I was thinking that nothing could be further from the truth. These are some of the most difficult cases that a judge has to deal with because we're talking about pictures of sex abuse of children. And in every case, when I am dealing with something like this, it is important to me to make sure that the children's perspective, the children's voices are represented in my sentencings. And what that means is that for every defendant who comes before me and who suggests, as they often do, that they're just a looker, that these crimes don't really matter.
Let's bring in senior Washington reporter Devin Dwyer, who's also inside the committee room. Devin, this was probably the most fired up we've seen Jackson so far. She was very detailed in her response here, addressing how serious these crimes are, but also why sentencing guidelines might be outdated in these cases. What did you make of that response?
Yeah, criticism of her record in the child porn cases, Diane, has been the most controversial Republican attack so far. They've been raised by Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri. Actually, late last week, in a series of tweets, he said her record is a long record that lets offenders off the hook in sentences, which she issued below the federal guidelines in several cases. You heard it alluded to there, but Hawley also accused her of endangering children. Those claims came out yesterday with her two young daughters were sitting right there in the hearing chamber. But today we got to hear from her directly for the first time. You're right. She was very forceful. I was in this room. You could have heard a pin drop. Every single senator, all 22 of them, were fixated on Ketanji Brown Jackson. At other times they're doing work, but today they were listening to her intently. And she pushed back, Diane, explaining that those guidelines for sentences in child porn cases are arbitrary. The Congress actually gives judges discretion to look at the guidelines, but take into account other factors. And Judge Jackson said she sentences these offenders to 20, 30, 40 years of supervision, forbids them from using computers. A clear effort by her to push back on Senator Hawley and these claims that she's soft on crime. I should say we will hear from Senator Hawley a little later this afternoon, so that will be something to watch, Diane.
And let's also bring in ABC News political director Rick Klein and ABC News political contributor Yvette Simpson for more. Rick, what do you think has been the most challenging moment for Judge Jackson so far?
To me, the highlight was Senator Lindsey Graham, who voted to confirm Judge Jackson to her current position just a year ago, hone in on not Judge Jackson, but some of the ways that Republican nominees have been treated in the past. A very awkward and uncomfortable exchange where Senator Graham asked Judge Jackson to rate how religious she is on a scale of 1 to 10. Judge Jackson said she didn't feel comfortable responding to it. And then Senator Graham said, I was hoping that you'd say something like that, essentially that we wouldn't ever judge you the way that Democrats have judged Republicans. To me, it was a statement about all the baggage that gets brought into the room. This is setting up a situation where people like Senator Graham could vote against Judge Jackson, not because of who she is, but because of who she isn't, and also because of how previous nominees, who had nothing to do with the current situation and the current decision by President Biden to choose Judge Jackson, have been handled. So a lot of political baggage, and you're going to hear more of that today with 2024 contenders beginning to take the microphone. They are going to bring factors that have really very little to do directly with Judge Jackson into that hearing room. And I think it was a challenge for Judge Jackson to respond and sometimes not respond to those kind of lines of inquiry.
And Yvette, on the line of inquiry related to court packing, is expanding the court a priority for Democrats right now?
We would call it court expansion, and I think it is. I think it's also just want to say it's unfair to ask Judge Jackson about that. And I think her response was spot on. This is a policy decision. It is not a constitutional question. The Constitution does not limit the number of justices. But yes, expansion of the court is something that is on Democrats' radar. What we know is that the court has been expanded before. Typically, it has been expanded to mimic the number of judicial circuits that exist, and the number now is 13. And so there are a lot of efforts. The progressive movement is certainly behind that. But that would not be a question that would come before the Supreme Court, or one that would be appropriate to ask a nominee to the Supreme Court. One of the things I want to point out that Republicans continue to do is they're saying one thing and they're doing a different thing. They're saying they want an independent justice, but they're asking her questions of policy. They're saying they want her to adhere to the Constitution, but they're asking questions that are not of a constitutional nature. And so she is handling herself very well. I would agree with Rick that this display by Lindsey Graham is deplorable. It's just disgraceful, and it's an embarrassment, I think, for this entire process.
And Rachel, as they get ready to come back from this break, how can we expect the rest of the day to play out?
Well, it is certainly going to be a marathon of a day up here on Capitol Hill. So far, only 5 senators have been able to question Judge Jackson. That means, by my math, you still got 17 left, 30 minutes each. We're going to see this unfold. She's very much expecting to be in that chair for the course of 11 hours today. So expect more tough questions. And, of course, Democrats trying to give her a chance to clarify her record and respond and get ahead of some of the Republican criticism. But I can tell you, we do have our eye out, waiting to hear more from Senator Lindsey Graham. As Rick mentioned, he voted for her confirmation to the D.C. Circuit today. He says, leaving that hearing, that he sees some red flags, a sign that he may not support her this time around, Diane.
All right. Big thanks to Rachel, Rick, Yvette, and Devin. We're going to return now to your regular programming on ABC, but David Muir will be back with a full wrap-up of the day's proceedings on World News Tonight, and our special gavel-to-gavel coverage will continue on ABC News Live.
This has been a special report from ABC News.
Hi everyone, George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.